Study section 9. William Blake and English Romantic Tradition. Introduction. In this study section, you'll be exposed to English Romantic tradition by expounding your prior knowledge of the contribution of William Blake to English poetry. ENG 111, Study section 7. Romantic poetry. You should be prepared to understand the difference between this tradition and others in English poetry. Learning outcomes. When you have studied this section, you should be able to explain the characteristics of romantic poetry, discuss the contribution of William Blake to English Romantic, emergence of Romantic period in English poetry, reflection. Beauty is true. Truth, beauty. That is all. Ye know on earth, and all you need to know. John Keats. Ode on a Grecian Urn. Before the Romantic period, English poets were dissatisfied with the mechanical and artificial rigidity of 17th century literary practice. The elegance, taste, and wit of the classical predecessors, which was emulated by neoclassical poets, was put aside in the Romantic period. Romantic tradition therefore came as a challenge to the established social, political, and literary assumptions of the neoclassical period. Romantic tradition in poetry is therefore synonymous with enquiry, quest, or spirit of investigation, and the urge to challenge established assumptions or statu quo. The Romantic spirit was a free expression of the revolution wave, the spirit of non-conformity and rebellion against established authority. It demands the ethical principle of prudence, and it approved the urge to advance to new achievements. The Romantic brought a new definition to poetry as spiritual satisfaction for the soul of man. It was the expression of a reality that was profound and sometimes critical. Inescapable and personal. Carter and McRae, 2001-202, contend, the Romantic period is seen today as a crucial time in history. It embodies many of the conflicts and ideological debates which are still at the heart of the modern world. Political freedom or repression, individual and collective responsibility, masculine and feminine roles, past, present, and future. This issue recurred time and again in Romantic writing. The Romantic period was a time when ideologies were at the melting pot and all issues were considered to be important. Innocence or experience, old or new, country or city, etc. In Romantic poetry, nature was redefined and seen as the image of the divine God. Imagination was also redefined as a free creative spirit in man. The Romantics used myth and symbols and as a significant tool of poetry. Besides, their poetry focuses on some of the following. 1. Description of the natural environment. 2. Reaction against industrial revolution, as William Blake does in Songs of Innocence and Songs of Experience, and William Wordsworth in lyrical ballads. 3. Use of native dialects or simple speeches. 4. Simple characters in simple life. 5. Graveyard sentiments and death wishes, e.g. Thomas Gray, elegy written in a country churchyard. 6. Imagination as a creative agent and vehicle of communication with the Godhead. The poets include Percy B. Shelley, Ode to the West Wind, S.T. Coleridge, Kubla Khan, The Rime of the Ancient Mariner, John Keats. Ode on a Grecian Urn, Gerard Manley Hopkins and William Wordsworth, A Perfect Woman, William Blake's Songs of Innocence and Songs of Experience. Songs of Innocence describes the simplicity of a child's mind, whereas Songs of Experience describe the tyranny of the authority of an adult. Contributions of William Blake to English Romantic tradition. William Blake, 1757 to 1827, came to be recognized as a poetry genius in 20th century. He was baptized at St. James Church, Piccadilly. He was trained at home by his mother because he never went to school. He was well exposed to the works of William Shakespeare, John Milton, and Ben Jonson. He trained as an engraver from the age of 14 to 21. In 1782, he married Catherine Boucher, and the family moved to Leicester-Fields. He published his poetry collection, Songs of Innocence, in 1789, and later added Songs of Experience in 1794. The poem set the world of pastoral innocence and childhood against the world of adult corruption and repression. He brought his knowledge of engraving on his poetry by illustrating them in a way that they would be read visually and verbally. He rejected the formal restriction of Augustan poetry. He holds an individual view of the world in which he views it in terms of opposites. He wrote that without contraries is no progression, and so most of his poems reflect major oppositions as a contrast between the order of the 18th century and the sense of liberation felt in the 1970s. Examples are The Marriage of Heaven and Hell and the Songs of Innocence and Experience. In the latter, several poems were written in pairs. Blake demonstrated a good understanding of human existence by critically examining the physical and spiritual sides of man. He made use of symbols. For example, children, flower, lambs, or seasons symbolize innocence and adults. Experience, industrialization, machines, leaders, urban and industrial landscape symbolize oppression. Like most romantic poets, images of childhood were central to his poems. In his poem, The Chimney Sweeper, the contrast between nature and social order and between innocence and social prayers were brought to the fore. Blake was also concerned about the effect of industrialization on the individual. His poem, London, discussed the issue and pointed to the fact that even River Thames was chartered to be used for commercial purposes. Tip: Blake's vision was social. He was concerned about issues that affected nature, natural course of events, and members of the society. His poetry actually was a crusade against exploitation at all levels. His main stylistic devices included symbols, images, and use of binary opposites. Study section summary. In this study section, we discussed the characteristics of romantic poetry. We went further to examine the contributions of William Blake to English Romantic period. End of study section 9. Thanks for listening.